The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela rejects the disconcerting judicial pronouncement of the Supreme Court of Justice of the United Kingdom that impedes the right of the Venezuelan state to dispose of part of its international reserves deposited in the Bank of England. In Geneva, Director General of the World Health Organization called for the world to pull together and make the difficult decisions needed to end the COVID-19 pandemic within the next year. The government of Lebanon asked the United Nations to change its approach to Syrian refugees. This is from the South. I'm your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the headquarters of teleSUR in Havana. We begin with the news. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela rejects the disconcerting judicial pronouncement of the Supreme Court of Justice of the United Kingdom that prevents the right of the Venezuelan state to dispose, through the Central Bank of Venezuela, part of its international reserves deposited in the Bank of England. This decision violates the norms of public international law, the Venezuelan constitutional order, and British legislation, and at the same time represents serious risks for the investments that the international community has entrusted in the financial system of the United Kingdom, since the latter resorts to fraud to illegally take possession of the resources entrusted to it. The Supreme Court of Justice of the United Kingdom has subordinated itself to the mandate of the British executive, thus revealing the lack of separation of powers, of impartiality, and, above all, of independent action of this judicial body. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela rejected the decision of a court of the United Kingdom that prevents the country from recovering its own international reserves, which would help mitigate the impacts generated by the illegal blockade of the United States. Regarding the unprecedented decision of the United Kingdom not to recognize the constitutional authorities of Venezuela, the Foreign Ministry stated that it will continue to use legitimate legal methods to recover the international resources that belong to its population. Yesterday afternoon at Chilean local time, President-elect Gabriel Boric and outgoing Chilean President Sebastián Piñera met at La Moneda Palace after the leftist won with an unexpectedly large victory over his far-right rival in a runoff vote.
I'm leaving in peace because we are going to have an orderly transfer of power, a transfer of institutional power where the state apparatus makes itself available for democracy to work. And that is good news for Chile because it is something that perhaps one does not know how to appreciate until it is lost. And in Chile, we have to value it and deepen it.
Members of the migrant caravan met with officials from different Mexican government agencies to demand free transit through the country and to achieve their goal of reaching the northern border without interference from the migration authorities or the National Guard. Our correspondent Eduardo Martinez has the details.
Since very early, the migrant caravan mobilized in different points of the Mexican capital. The most important encounter was at the Secretariat of Government, where they would meet with officials of Mexican government. A commission of 11 people of different nationalities and the activists who have accompanied them entered the building. The rest remained outside waiting for a favorable response to their request for mobility through Mexican territory. Some are seeking to reach the northern border to cross into the United States, but others, like Samir, need to go to a particular state for reunification with some of their family members. We are not in a hurry to go to the United States. We want to go to Monterrey because we have our family waiting for us there. The fatigue of having traveled half the country on foot is visible, but they have preferred to go hungry, endure the weather conditions and migratory checkpoints rather than continue to suffer the poverty and violence in countries such as Honduras, where everyone hopes that the situation will change with the new government. We hope it will be better for the Honduran families that stayed there because the government that was there was a narco government. Because of the brother of Juan Orlando Hernandez was a narco, I think he knew and was in their own overview. The meeting between the migrants and the Mexican authorities lasted 5 hours. The agreements were immediately communicated. There will be humanitarian visas and residency for those who have them because some already have refugee status, others have visas already and will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis and their needs will be carefully considered. They have criminalized us and had completely militarized the southern border, and they said that the treatment of the immigration issue will be completely modified, and we have been witnesses and hope that they will honor their word. In this context, the Secretariat of Foreign Affairs and the Undersecretariat of Human Rights and Migration announced a pilot plan for the regularization of Haitians. The measures adopted will be released in the next few days.
Eduardo Martínez, teleSUR, Ciudad de México.
We'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Hi, welcome back to From the South. In Geneva, Director General of the World Health Organization called for the world to pull together and make the difficult decisions needed to end the COVID-19 pandemic within the next year. The official warned ahead of next Christmas that this morning during a press conference, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said 2022 must be the year we end the pandemic. Increasing social mixing will lead to more deaths, he also added. As end-of-year festivities approach, he acknowledges that all of us want to spend time with friends and family. All of us want to get back to normal. But Ghebreyesus adds that it's better to cancel now and celebrate later than to celebrate now and grieve posthumously.
There can be no doubt that increased social mixing over the holiday period in many countries will lead to increased cases, overwhelmed health systems, and more deaths. All of us are sick of this pandemic. All of us want to spend time with friends and family. All of us want to get back to normal. The fastest way to do this is for all of us, leaders and individuals, to make the difficult decisions that must be made to protect ourselves and others.
In the United States, studies revealed that the Pentagon concealed the real number of civilian casualties from its attacks in Asian regions. According to the article titled "Hidden Pentagon Records Reveal Patterns of Failure in Deadly Airstrike," the actual number of casualties from these attacks was much higher than the 1,417 fatalities reported by the U.S. military in Iraq and Syria, and the 188 reported in Afghanistan. The reports presented by the Pentagon contrast with the more than 1,300 hidden reports of civilian casualties obtained by local media. The fact that many reports mistook civilian casualties with enemy soldiers, as well as the fact that the attacks were often based on faulty intelligence. Signatories to Colombia's 2016 peace accords were forced to leave the area where they had settled after the signing of agreements due to the lack of security guarantees for them and their families. From Bogotá, our correspondent Hernan Tobar has the details.
These images show the departure of more than 30 families from the territorial space for resettlement and training areas Rondon Vereda El Yari in the municipality of La Macarena, department of Meta, to Doncello in the department of Caqueta, where there are already 40 families who have been individually displaced. But what caused the forced displacement of these peace signatories?
This displacement is due to the fact that the government has not been able to guarantee the permanence and lives of the peace signatories in El Yari. There are 31 families, 61 people who are being displaced today.
The humanitarian caravan carrying former combatants and their families was attacked by unidentified gunmen who opened fire.
There is a truck burning and their lives and those of all other signatories who are accompanying them are at risk. We call on the international community, the social movements, the international community to defend peace, not to abandon us. Colombia and the international community cannot allow the violent to destroy Colombians' dream of peace.
A familiar situation had already occurred the previous year, when about 110 peace signatories and their families were forced to leave the territorial space of Ituango due to the presence of paramilitaries in this region of Antioquia department, to which is now added the new incident in the department of Meta.
The absence of security guarantees from the government for the signatories of the peace agreement is evident. It is important to highlight that this forced displacement is due to the lack of comprehensive implementation of the peace agreement, especially with regard to safeguarding the security of former combatants. The government does not protect them in any way and instead sponsors forced displacement.
The Presidential Counselor for Stabilization and Consolidation offered a statement on the incidents that took place in El Yari, offering a particular version of the events and assured that the security of former combatants is a priority for the Ivan Duque government.
We were advancing in the way they chose with the support of the United Nations and the Ombudsman's office. A couple on a motorcycle attacked one of the vehicles without any consequences for any of the occupants. At this moment, the public forces, the army, and the police are accompanying them, and very shortly the transfer will be restarted with absolute security.
According to the Institute for Development and Peace Studies, so far this year 44 peace signatories have been assassinated. Since the signing of the agreements in 2016, the figure exceeds 290.
teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
We have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Now, welcome back. The government of Lebanon asked the United Nations organization to change its approach towards Syrian refugees. During a meeting between the President of Lebanon, Michel Aoun, and the Secretary General of the International Organization, Antonio Guterres, Aoun stressed the importance of this decision in order to encourage refugees to return to their villages and homeland. Meanwhile, Guterres indicated that the political leaders in Beirut do not have the right to divide and paralyze the nation, while highlighting that the President of the Republic must be a symbol of unity. He also considered that next year's parliamentary elections are key to choose a way forward. This meeting takes place within the framework of the official visit of Guterres to Lebanon called Nation of Cedars. The visit that began on Sunday will last 3 days. Israeli Defense Forces authorities granted their soldiers the power to exercise heavier repression against Palestinian citizens mobilized against the occupation. The new instructions were made public the past few weeks in a written document to Army personnel deployed in the West Bank. In November, Chief of General Staff Aviv Kohavi approved changes to the Israeli Defense Forces firing regulations, a move described by the Israeli media as dramatic. In this context, UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported that in the first 11 months of this year, Israeli troops killed 322 Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. In Tripoli, Libya, a group of candidates in war-torn Libya's presidential election said Monday that they expect the polls to be delayed despite the lack of an official announcement to that effect. Scheduled for Friday, the vote is meant to cap a United Nations-led peace process after a decade of conflict. Presidential bids by several divisive figures, a controversial electoral law, and a lack of agreement over the powers of the next government have posed a series of obstacles. On Monday, 17 candidates issued a joint statement in which they urged the Electoral Commission to reveal the reasons why there will be no election on the date set and called on it to publish a final list of candidates.
Candidates agreed or respected the constitution the events approved in a referendum as the basis for preserving rights and protecting freedoms. Thirdly, the commitment to a civil state as the sole path to the establishment of a state of law and institution. The candidates agree on asking the Higher National Election Committee to publish a final list of the candidates for the presidential election.
The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization included a traditional Syrian musical genre from the city of Aleppo on its representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. The recognition is seen by Syrians as a new triumph in their battle against terrorism, which has been trying to erase their cultural identity for more than 10 years. Our correspondent has a story.
The Syrian Minister of Culture announced the news at a press conference during which she denounced that after more than 10 years of terrorist war, Syria today faces an economic and psychological blockade aimed at destroying its identity and will and undermining its ability to resist. She clarified that with the inclusion of Al-Qudud al-Halabiyya on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the country broke the blockade and managed to place itself on the world cultural map, allowing it to move onto the world tourist map.
The inclusion of Al-Qud on the World Heritage List confirms that no one can tear us away from our roots and alienate us from our culture, as the whole world now recognizes that we are the builders of a civilization and that our culture inherited through generations is recognized worldwide.
Syrians celebrated the news in the capital's iconic Umayvad Square, singing and dancing to the traditional music of Aleppo al-Qudud. They praise UNESCO's action as an additional step in safeguarding their cultural identity dating back thousands of years, as well as a Syrian victory in the struggle to preserve, protect, and defend national heritage and pass it on to future generations.
This event shows that despite the terrorist war that attack our cultural identity and our heritage, we are able to show the whole world that our intangible heritage is our identity, that we will persevere and pass on the new generations.
I congratulate all the people of Syria for this achievement, which is a victory that shows the culture and civilized nature of the Syrian people. And today, with this achievement, the name of Syria and the flag of Syria will be held high thanks to the civilization and cultural creativity of its people. Al-Qudud al-Halabiya is a traditional musical genre typical of the Syrian province of Aleppo in the form of a uniform melody sung to the accompaniment of musical ensemble in a religious context. This year, it joins the Damascene Rose and Shadow Play inscribed on the Cultural Heritage List in 2019 and 2018, respectively. Symbols of Syria's rich and diverse culture far removed from the terrorist ideology that, for more than a decade, has been trying in vain to propagate in this Arab country.
We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Dio Martin. Thanks for watching.